конкретное выражение. Там можно дойти показать. So, dear colleagues, welcome again. So we start with our program. The next presentation is by Kapitolina Fedorova, Natalia Tšuikina, Aleksandra Lapa, po-russki, Transliteration in Russian medium online communication across the Baltic states and formation of local standards. Good morning. Thank you for coming. I will present in a single person. Unfortunately, my colleague Natalia Tšuikina has a lecture now, and I hope Aleksandra will be here also. Maybe she's late. And actually, maybe some of you were here last year, because then Natalia and I, we started with this topic and presenting our first findings. And after that, on the transliteration practices. I was lucky because this year I have a very good MA student who decided to dedicate herself to this topic. And for what I will present today, we designed her experiment together. Of course, I supervised her, but she did a lot of, real job, collecting data and sorting them out, analyzing and so on. But we did it in, discussing all the steps. But I will present on behalf of all of us. And just very briefly, this background. Because why we became interested in this topic. Multilingual practices quite often is very difficult to describe, to grasp, because what we call translanguaging and or language assemblage and so on, it's quite difficult to describe in certain rules. And especially from the outside, from people without linguistic training, sometimes it looks chaotic, like people just doing whatever they want. And what is interesting that when there is no official standard, still quite often people, even in how to use non-standard variation, not standard variants, people create a sort of local norm from grassroots norm formation. And of course, because digital communication became takes a lot of our time these days. We all are constantly texting with someone and reading online and so on. And so there are a lot of opportunities to maintain and change certain practices. And even if it's a minority language in a certain country, through online communication, people can connect to other minority speakers and so go beyond their immediate circle. And then, it's a good opportunity to study how these new local variants of minority languages develop in different contexts and in contact with different languages. And in this sense, transliteration is a very complex phenomenon because, of course, it's a very ancient phenomenon because every time a writing system created for one language is used for another language, that's transliteration. And there could be standards, official standards, but people can not adhere to them. And in the Baltic region, the situation is interesting because we have 3 different states with 3 different state languages. And in all 3 countries, Russian-speaking communities are quite big, and there are a lot of online Facebook groups where people communicate. Like, where it's possible to collect data on different variants of Russian in these 3 different contexts. In all 3 countries, of course, standard languages, state languages use Latin alphabets, and with different modifications, with different special characters, with diacritics and so on. So again, it's interesting how there is correlation between Cyrillic alphabet and these local versions of Latin alphabet interact. Well, and just to show you, why it's not here? Okay. There are examples from 3 Facebook groups, one Estonian, one Latvian, one Lithuanian. And all you can find that, well, like normally people write in Cyrillic letters in Russian, but in Cyrillic letters, but all the time you can find examples when the same language in Russian is written in Latin alphabet, transliterated. And so it's possible to compare how people do it in different contexts in different countries. Well, so that was our initial, and actually this is the slide from our last year presentation with Natalia Tšuikina, where we discovered this material and started to do research on it, and some preliminary conclusions, like, of course, there are these problematic letters, Cyrillic letters, which don't have correspondent letters in Latin alphabet, and different solutions for them, and high level of variation, even on individual level, was obvious. And, well, some... again, in online data, it's very difficult to distinguish between native and non-native language use, because quite often people using transliteration are not non-native Russian speakers, because, for example, in Estonia, a lot of Estonians do know Russian, but they do not have Cyrillic letters, do not use Cyrillic letters in their usual communication, and quite often they can answer people in Russian, but using Latin alphabet. And but still, there are some tendencies towards local conventionalization. And our idea was that it would be interesting to compare this real live data from online communication with some data collected specifically by experiment. And as I told, I was lucky to have a person to do this experiment, and now I show results from this year. So there was an online form with 3 local questions: personal information, gender, age, country of residence, and language of education, which is important. And then there were several questions where people should like multiple choice questions about the use of transliteration and attitudes. And then there was a transformation task. There was one very strange sentence in Russian, meaning Ethiopian phlegmatic camel is chewing near entrance. I don't know. So well, some bush with bitter berries, hibiscus, and it's sort of dying or whatever. But the thing is that this sentence has all the letters of Cyrillic alphabet, Russian alphabet, and well, it was and some of them are repeated, so it's possible to compare them in different positions. So it was very, very good sentence for our purposes. So participants. Obviously, they were from 3 countries. Unfortunately, not the same amount. It was very difficult to collect the same amount of people. And unfortunately, a bit less from Lithuania. But anyway, I think it's still representative. And regarding age, you can see that the biggest part were young people between 19 and 35. Being for obvious reasons, because as usually using snowball technique of collecting data, it's easier to rely on your own contacts. And in case of a younger person, of course, well, but I think it also useful because we collected data on the very active users of online technologies. And you see that languages of education are quite diverse, and actually the amount, if you sum them up, this can be bigger than participants from country, because of course people can have education, basic education in one language and then higher education in other languages. Well, that's our informant. The questions were, do you use transliteration in handwriting? And as you can see, of course, very, very few people do it in handwriting. Well, why you should do it? And most people never do it, or only very rarely. And another question was about if you use transliteration when writing on a smartphone, and you can see that the proportion is quite bigger, and 30% answered that no, but other people do this practice. And the same question was about writing on computer. Well, you can see that it's sort of close to the smartphone data. The next question was, do you encounter transliteration in social media with variants? Yes, often, not so often, yes, but very rarely, and never. So we can see that transliteration is a sort of common practice, but not very often, not so often or rarely. So sort of marginal phenomenon, but still visible, and most people encounter it and pay attention. And for messengers, so not just reading social media, but through rectal texting, you can see that even more people answer that they encounter it often, really often. People do texting and using transliteration. And regarding attitudes, that was quite interesting because we expected that will be more answers like, I have difficulties with reading it and I consider it inappropriate, but you see that there are quite few such answers, and most people either see no problem or can read but do not like. So, well, it's not a big issue, sort of like normalizing approach to this practice. And then the most interesting thing is what actually we discovered when compared the realization of the so-called problematic letters, which were transliterated differently. Because of course, with such letters as "a" or there are no problems. Or "n" or "m", they are the same, and people do them. There is no variation, but with all those letters, well, plus soft signs, hard signs, of course, I will focus on these letters. The variation is huge. You can see that the most awful letter for people learning Russian, "sha", is represented in this number of variants. And yeah, but as a teacher of Russian as a foreign language, I can tell you, yes, that's a very, very unhappy letter because usually students hate it. Cannot pronounce the sound and don't understand its meaning and so on. Well, but other letters, they are also even such sort of like simple letters like "u" and "ya". Also, they have a lot of variants. And in analysis, you can see this different colors, what they mean actually. Well, first, underlined is the most common variant. And you can see that in some cases, there is this one favorite, the most common variant across all three countries, across all the data. But in some cases, it's not so obvious. I mean, it's not just one obvious favorite. Another thing is with it's not very good because it's not this color sort of mixed with, but okay. So this variance in like dark green, actually they mark what I would call like English rules of transliteration, or those that are used in most cases when Cyrillic letters are transliterated. Although we know that actually there are different systems on transliteration and each publishing house use their own, and it could be quite a nightmare, well, for us publishing in English all the time, but with the Russian data, well, obviously I don't understand why now people should transliterate in academic publishing, because, well, it's not on computer, you can do any scripts you want, but still, we should do it and all the time. But there are sort of like most conventional things to do it, and we all know them, like che is ch and she is sh and so on. And so you can see that in some cases, this English or international variant is the most common also. With this violet, we marked two cases, which came actually from the epoch of short text messages, when people did it on, like old phones not smartphones. And there was some conventions like the letter che was represented by number 4, or sha by the W, just sort of graphic resemblance. And we can see that these variants are not popular anymore. People do not use them as often as probably they did it, well, at least in my personal experience, like 20 years ago. And what I'm remarked here with this blue, it's a deviation from this like international standard, sort of simplification of the transliteration. For example, when this unhappy letter sha is done just the same way as sha, without any differences, just so it's sort of ignored. And you can see that it's the most common variant to do it this way. And another thing is, again, in standard transliteration of h sound, h letter, it should be kh. But people prefer to do it simple, just use h for h. And or the same with c. Standard international is ts, but for most people using c is natural, again, because it's mostly like extra letter, which is not used in this, not like in English. And the most interesting thing is where we discover actual like stable variation, or sort of conventionalization of local variants. It happened in at least, I think we need to do it again, analyze them even more carefully and with more statistical instruments. But what we can see now is interesting case of the U, which is done differently by people in Estonia and Latvia with U, and in Lithuania with EU. And again, in like international convention way, it should be YU, or it could be this way, like in official translation rules in Russia now, but well, that's another issue. Interestingly, in Lithuanian data, for you, it's EU, but for ya, which, well, I would expect to do the same, it's not like this. Ya is, most cases, is JA and or YA. And the most interesting case, of course, as expected, is U letter, another unhappy sound. But so you can see that it's done differently in all three countries. For Lithuania, it's Y, the same way that should be in English. For Latvia, it's E. And Estonians, they either use this Y or E, but all these examples are from Estonian because either it's the use of letter, Estonian letter, corresponding Estonian letter, or different attempts to use something similar. Even you can see Q is used just to show it's, again, some graphic examples probably or something like that. So we can see that in some cases there are indeed this local standardization, grassroots standardization, but not necessarily in other cases, but also people tend to do it in a common way. So this some kind of conclusions, preference to we consider preference to the simplest solutions. If people prefer using English digraphs, then either instead of using diacritics, although in those alphabets there are like for sh or che letters with diacritics that could express the same sounds. Still, their use is not very popular, and that's what I told you about this local information, and that these short message letters are losing popularity in modern use. And the final question actually in the questionnaire was, what device did you use for this survey? Because we're interested actually how people actually did this transformation task. And you can see smartphone is absolute leader, again, because the most respondents were young people, and well, computer and tablet. Well, basically, that's it. And oops, yes, that's some situation for you.
Thank you very much. So we have a short time for questions. Yes, please.
Just language. I just wondered if we can call the standardization, because actually concerning Estonia, here in the institute we have this language planning department, and we have actually standardization for transliteration rules from Russian to Estonian. And we have here on the website also rules which are used in Russian Federation, so that if you say that newspapers, they just write as they want, it's wrong, because we don't know about our regulations, and this is the work we have to do, maybe just to make them so that they're acknowledged about this. So the question is, why you still call it standardization?
Well, okay, it's grassroots standardization, because we are interested not in journalists, not in public, but not in official language use, but in this everyday communication on social media, in texting and so on. And well, there are rules, but people either don't know or don't care about rules, right? Of course, in all three countries, there are rules, because there is this problem of transliterations, surnames, names and surnames. And that's another, it's possible to find a lot of literature on that, because in some cases it's a sensitive issue because of different, well, a lot of problems actually with transliteration, surnames, and people quite often are unhappy about that. But, well, that's, of course, there is an official standard, but it just our focus is on this grassroots standardization.
Tendencies. So it's not standardization itself.
Well,
yeah, tendencies how people.
No, okay, conventionalization. Okay, yeah, probably. Yeah, thank you.
Please, the last question, because we don't have more time.
I'm out of my depth with Slavic languages, but I was wondering if with Lithuanian there might be something close to Polish, because it should have sort of conventions for dealing with some of the.
No,
I don't know.
Well, I can answer this. It's a huge problem because Lithuanian Poles are fighting for the right to write their names
in a Polish way.
Polish, because in Estonia, as well as in Finland, if something is in original, in Latin character, we don't change it. And in Lithuania and Latvia, they change it. So you have a Polish digraph, and you have, instead of that, you are supposed to use a letter with a diacritic in Lithuanian. So it's an interesting story, but it's not relevant.
Yes. But, thank you, Anna. And well, yes, with transliteration, people struggle a lot. Because every time, for example, when you buy airplane ticket, it's usually impossible to get any diacritics and, well, a lot of stuff. And even I have problems with being, well, I'm Fedorova, but of course I'm Fedorova in official Russian documents. So my surname is translated as Fedorova. And here in Estonia, people all the time do it like Fyodorova. And, well, you know. Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So our next presentation is by Ilenia Del Popolo Marchitto, Linguistic Gender Stereotypes in Russian and Their Impact on Politeness Perception.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm very happy to be here presenting the results of my social linguistic experiments on linguistic gender stereotypes in Russian, particularly about the linguistic expression of politeness, and also the way this, or whether these stereotypes impact politeness perception. So the study focuses on two main research questions. The first one is whether certain linguistic choices tend to be associated with a particular gender, and whether gender stereotypes affect perception and evaluation of linguistic politeness, and namely whether an identical speech event, an identical utterance, is evaluated as more or less polite, depending on whether it is associated with a man or a woman. The study focuses particularly on request formulations or prompt to actions in Russian, because requests, when we are basically imposing on others, trying to get them to do something for us, of course, they are particularly subject to linguistic conventions, expectation, also social expectations. And previous research on the topic shows that as a result of traditional societal roles and also social expectation, men are generally expected to be more assertive, direct in interaction, especially when performing a request, whereas women are supposed to be more polite, cooperative, and indirect, especially when requesting others to do something. So I conducted the experiment by selecting authentic linguistic materials, authentic linguistic stimuli from the full-length transcription of two corpora of Russian spoken language. The first one is Один речевой день, one speaker's day, and the second one is Речь москвичей, so the speech of Moscow people, and I incorporated them without any explicit gender cues into two different questionnaires. Why two different questionnaires? Because in the first questionnaire, participants had to first of all try to guess the speaker's gender, so whether they thought it was a man or a woman, and later try to evaluate the degree of politeness of each utterance on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 corresponds to impolite and 5 corresponds to very polite. And the second questionnaire is more like the control group. So here there was absolutely no reference to gender. They just had to evaluate the degree of politeness of each utterances. And this is more for the second research question. So to understand how their perception or judgment might be influenced by the variable of gender. So these are the questionnaires. This is how the questionnaires look like. The first one, as you can see, for each utterance, they had to guess the speaker's gender. I focused only on men and women because in my corpora, I only had men and women, male and female informants. So the options were 4, woman, most probably woman, most probably man or men. And then they had this 5 scale to evaluate. And the second one, which allowed for a comparison between potentially gender biased evaluation on impoliteness and more neutral one, only had the second type of questions. So no reference to gender at all. I had a total of 250 respondents, so 125 for each questionnaire. They are more or less balanced, but of course, since I also relied on acquaintances and Facebook groups, I couldn't exactly control who was filling in these forms. So in terms of gender, they're more or less balanced. I had 100 women in the first and 89 in the second, 24 men in the first, 35 in the second, and 1 non-binary person for each questionnaire. Like for the previous presentation, I also had several age groups, but the most common was people aged from 18 to 24, and then 25 to 34. So mainly, let's say, younger generations, but also the other groups were represented. And country, so these informants were living in 33 different countries, but some of them were just 1 or 2 maybe for each country. And the most common were Estonia. For obvious reason, I had more acquaintances here in both questionnaires, and then Russia, Italy, and then I had several other countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Armenia, Georgia, Ukraine, Thailand, very many, but Estonia, Russia, and Italy were the more common. I also asked about their level of education and whether they use Russian as consider Russian their native or foreign language. Also here, I would say that my data are quite balanced for both questionnaires because I have the majority of considering Russian their native language, 112 and 110, and 13 and 15 considering it as a foreign language. And the most important variable for me was which other languages they use on a daily basis, because this can influence their evaluation of politeness and also their stereotypes. And the majority of my respondents, the 78%, had a multilingual profile using up to 5 languages on a daily basis. The most common combination was Russian, Estonian, and English, or Russian, Estonian, Russian, Italian, and English. So this was my more common combination. But as you can see, a lot of languages are represented here, also in combination. And then there was this small percentage of informants, around 25%, using only Russian on a daily basis and living in Russia. So about the first research question, the results, as expected, are clear that direct, unmitigated requests, which align with the idea of stereotypical masculinity, were more consistently associated to men, whereas indirect formulations containing especially diminutives, but also other mitigation markers, hesitation, hedges, were more commonly associated with women. And participants themselves refer to have mainly relied on linguistic stereotypes, were making their guesses, but also on intuition, personal experience, But what I found out is that social stereotypes actually plays an even more crucial role than linguistic stereotypes, and I will show how with some concrete examples. So let's start from linguistic stereotypes as such. So here we have an example of a very direct request, very easy, close the door behind me. And here apparently my respondents seem to agree that this must have been said by a man. And the majority voted for men, or probably men. And the small percentage that voted for women were, of course, multilingual speakers. So this confirmed also the working hypothesis. But here we have a very verbose, redundant request, stereotypically associated with a woman, and also by my informant. They seem to agree on the fact that this should be a woman. Because here we have, for example, apologies before uttering the request, Alexei, excuse me, for God's sake. Then we have a lot of fillers, a lot of additional words that are not exactly related to the request that is being made, because this woman is just asking for assistance to fix her computer. And also diminutives, you can see vaprosik, minutku, я думаю, so hesitations and also hedges. But here we slowly move to from linguistic to also social stereotypes, and also basically, expectation related to gendered behaviors. Because here we have, I would say, a rather direct request, even if it's mitigated by please, by пожалуйста. But apparently the majority of respondents thought that this is a woman, because there is a person complaining about the television being too loud. And who can have said that, right? So they thought this was said by a woman. Here, they had a little bit more problems in identifying the gender, because in this case, there was a clash between, the use of very, let's say, vulgar curse word, but at the same time, we want, like, this person that uttered this request wanted a picture and taken from a specific angle, which in respondents' maybe mind was more connected to stereotypical, female speaker. And also in the basically open answer, there was even an informant that said that about the television one and about the photograph one, I'm sure there was a woman. So she was so sure that she even commented on this specifically. So you can see that in this case, basically the social stereotypes in a way wins over the linguistic stereotype about women don't using curse words generally. And even more obviously, this comes up when we have situations of when the topic or the situation of this request is related to, for example, childcare or also household activities. Because here we have a person asking her or his son to go do homework. So it's a prompt to action, not a request, more like a command here, I would say. We also have some vulgar expressions, but still the majority of participants thought that this must be a woman, or probably a woman, because homework, something that according to this societal roles and social expectation, apparently for informants was more related to women. And this was one of the most clear example of these social stereotypes, because here we have a very, in a way, also verbose request, redundant, with lot of fillers, but at the same time also direct. So we have this, listen to me. Now I don't have time, I'll call you when I can. On Friday, I'll bring you some laundry that I need to wash. So here the topic, the request is wash my laundry, please, right? This is the way the request is formulated. This request was originally, I can tell you, formulated by a young girl talking to her parents, specifically to her mother. But the majority of informants thought that this was a man, because of course women know how to wash their own laundry, right? So I think here social stereotypes are particularly evident, because a very small percentage of informants thought that this was a woman. About participants' comment, so one of the comments was made from this young man from Estonia, that says that I try to imagine myself in these situations. So how did he make these choices? And I tried to understand who could have pronounced certain words. In those instances where the intonation sounded a little bit more affectionate or friendly, it seemed to me more often that is a woman talking. But in those instances where the tone was more rough, more impolite, then I tended to think that it was a man. But of course, everything depends on the context. So there are always this kind of contradictions in respondents' answers, that on one hand, they think that it's very difficult to rely on stereotypes, but at the same time, women are generally more polite than men. I use, for example, curse word to make my choices. So definitely, if there were curse words, they thought it was a man. If there were diminutives or many words, they thought it was a woman. Women use more words than men. And this other informant says that if, like, honestly, in the majority of cases, it was easy for me to imagine both a woman or a man, but I chose women everywhere because in my experience, women are more polite than men. In addition, it seems to me that women use more often diminutives, but maybe it's just my impression. So one last comment. This young man from Finland, he said, basically he's commenting exactly what we have been discussing, so social stereotypes, because he says that it seems to me that many sentences can easily belong or be associated either to men or women, but very often what plays a crucial role on the answer is not the sentence itself, but the sexism. For example, the unconscious belief that man is a boss and the woman is a subordinate, that man goes to work and the woman stays at home. But everything can be, of course, completely the opposite, in fact. So the requests themselves are neutral if we don't think about who could have said them. So you can see that even if they distance themselves from these stereotypes, at the same time, they're still acknowledging that they play a role in our mind. And this leads us to the second research question, the most, in my opinion, important one. So whether these linguistic stereotypes also influence people's perception of what is actually polite or impolite as such, because of course, this is already very subjective. In this graph, we can see that, yes, they influence people's linguistic perception of politeness. And basically, people don't only expect women to be more polite, but they also more easily perceive politeness in women's speech. So here we have the 19 prompt to action, the 19 requests that were in my questionnaire. We can see that for each request, we have 3 different columns. The first column, the blue one, is basically the average politeness score in females, informant's responses, believing that the sentence was uttered by a woman. The red one is the responses in which they thought that the specific request was uttered by a man. And the third one, the gray one, the gray bar, is from the second questionnaire. So the one more neutral evaluation in which there were no reference to gender. And we can see that consistently for almost each request, people that thought this was said by a woman, they gave higher scores. So the average polite score is higher than who thought it was a man. For example, here we have the example of laundry, the third one. We can see that those who thought it was a woman agree that here is something like impolite, around 150, 170. But those who thought it was a man already gave lower scores. So we have something below like 140. And the gender neutral questionnaire, they said that it's something in between. So we have this trend. People who thought it was a woman, people who thought it was a man, and people that didn't know about the gender and didn't even think about gender. And this is a consistent trend for basically every question, every request. Also, if we look at the other one that we had about, for example, Zakroj za mной, so shut the door. behind me. Again, here, those who thought it was a woman, look at the blue bar. It's higher, it's around 3. But those who thought it was a man was already around 2. So same sentence, different ideas of who could have said that, and very different evaluation on average. So my conclusions are that participants' responses revealed systematic associations between certain grammatical, syntactical, lexical, stylistic choices and gender. However, social stereotypes seem to play an even more crucial role. And most interestingly, the perceived degree of politeness of each utterance varies according to the assumed gender of the speaker. So sentences are overall judged as more polite when attributed to a woman, so the exact same utterance, showing how politeness is not only expected from women more, but also more readily perceived in their speech. This is all from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So, time for questions and comments. Ask it.
No. Why didn't you give an opportunity to choose as a reply that this could have been either or both man and woman?
Because I wanted to, in a way, they had the opportunity, they had the open answers as well. They could have said, and some of them actually said, well, in this case, I imagined both a woman or a man. I could imagine both. But in order to have clear results, so I want them to choose. I want them to see, okay, but if you have to rely not on stereotypes, we shouldn't have a situation like this. I understand that they can have imagined both a man or a woman, but this is a clear tendency, in my opinion. So I didn't add that because they could have commented later that I'm sorry, like I had to choose something, but it was really hard for me to choose. Not everyone did it. And I strategically did it to see, okay, but if you have to choose, then what do you choose? You can have like 25% each, but if the trend is so clear. So it was more strategic. I did it to avoid, because otherwise maybe many people would have said, okay, no, for me, could have been both. But
how often they comment like that?
This is also very interesting moment as well, how often, because I had a question at the end of the questionnaire that said, with which of these utterances do you agree? And my basically utterances were women are in general more polite than men. Men are in general more polite than women. Women formulate more direct requests than men. Men formulate more. And the last two were like, I don't think there is a difference between the way men and women talk. And I think overall, there is not a clear difference between how men and women talk. And only 9 respondents chose that there's no difference between how men and women talk, and only 9 respondents chose that there is not a very pronounced difference between how men and women talk. And even more contradictory, because sometimes they picked that, but they picked all the others as well. So they picked that there is no difference, but at the same time, women are more polite than men, and women choose diminutives. This was very interesting to me, because I would expect that if you choose the last one, where there's no clear difference between men and women, that you don't pick that women are in general more polite than men. So this was interesting for me. And actually only 18 informants in total thought that there was no clear difference or no difference at all in their linguistic behavior.
I'm sorry.
They were, no, this is a very important question. So 51 informants from Estonia.
Those who said that doesn't matter.
It was very mixed, to be honest. I had for many, but I noticed that monolingual speakers tend to rely on stereotypes more, especially from Russia. Yeah, monolingual speakers were from there. Yes.
Thank you.
There was a tendency that I observed. And also there was a difference in terms of age, more than maybe languages, because I noticed that those who didn't conform to the main trend were generally aged 18, 25 or 26, 34, as expected maybe. But sorry if I take a little bit longer to answer this. This was very interesting, because in this case, people who thought that it was a man were actually from older age groups. Even if, for example, here you would expect that the societal traditional roles would have been more clearly like expressed by people from older age group. In this case, younger people who thought he was a woman, and older, in a way, thought that he was a man. So in those cases, it was quite the opposite. But in all the other cases, actually, younger generation didn't conform to the main stereotypes.
Thank you very much.
I've answered your question.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. So our next presentation is by Eglė Krivickaitė-Leišienė and Viktorija Kavaliauskaite-Vilkinienė. Written language characteristics in dyslexia, a case study. No ma ei tea, ma võin minna ja põhjendada sellega.
I think also I will use this one. Hello, everyone. It's always a pleasure to visit Tallinn for this wonderful conference. Thank you very much for organizers. I am Viktorija, and this presentation was prepared together with my colleague, Eglė Krivickaitė-Leišienė. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us today, so I will speak on behalf of both of us. We are from Vytautas Magnus University. We work at the Department of Lithuanian Studies, and we are particularly interested in language acquisition, in child language, and my colleague also is working as speech therapist. And today we would like to share our insights on the topic written language characteristics in dyslexia, a case study of a Lithuanian child. But before I start, I would like to confess that we are still working on this research. And so far, we approached the data more from a qualitative analysis perspective. We looked at examples, and today I will provide a number of them. But we still need to approach the data and from quantitative analysis perspective as well to gain in order to gain more detailed findings. Okay. Yes. Just brief overview of presentation. First of all, I will briefly describe dyslexia and how it affects language development. Then, of course, I will introduce what is the aim of this presentation, our methodology and data, key findings of our study, what written difficulties, what language difficulties can be found in written language in dyslexia, and of course, I will sum up with some concluding remarks. As we all know, the ability to read and write is one of the most important factors for achieving academic success in school. It is crucial for gaining knowledge, for learning, and children need to read words correctly, understand what we read, write words accurately, and express their thoughts clearly and coherently. Reading and writing is complex, of course, process, and it involves both decoding and understanding printed materials, and different brain functions are included here, including visual and auditory processing, as well as orthographic, phonological, and semantic systems. While some children acquire reading and writing skills without much difficulty, others face long-term challenges caused by dyslexia and specific language impairment. Together, these two developmental communication disorders affects about 7–10% of the school-age children. And it is told that dyslexia is one of the most common specific learning disorders. It constitutes about 80% of all cases of learning difficulties, and it emphasizes difficulties in learning to read, spell, and write despite adequate intellectual capacity, educational resources, and social background. So even the child has typical normal intelligence and sufficient social background and sufficient linguistic input, still because of dyslexia, he or she might face reading and writing difficulties. May face reading and writing difficulties. And studies show that children with dyslexia may also have problems in semantics, syntax, and discourse. Moreover, we have poor phonological processing skills, which involves perception, encoding, and storing of verbal information. Children with dyslexia are poor at phonological awareness tasks, have poor verbal short-term memory, and are slow at rapid automatized naming tasks. So this was short introduction to dyslexia. Now, our aim was to analyze written language characteristics of a Lithuanian child who was already diagnosed with dyslexia. And here, because we are speaking about written language characteristics, I have to mention one more term. It is dysgraphia, or specific learning disorder in written expression. Actually, we have terminology problem here because what in the past was described as dyslexia, it was related with reading disorder. Now dyslexia is emphasized that it involves both reading and writing disorder as the same as dysgraphia. So in other slides, you will also see term dysgraphia used because we here are speaking about written language characteristics. Our methodology was a case study. The child was diagnosed at the end of the first grade, at the age of 7, by specialists at the Psychological Pedagogical Service. We collected data over a 2-year period, and it consists of the child's written work, in total 8 notebooks and 2 exercise books from the first and second grades. And as I already mentioned, for today, we carried out a qualitative analysis. When we speak about dysgraphia, we can speak about universal features of dysgraphia that are common to all the languages, and language-specific features of dysgraphia. And today, I will provide examples what is language-specific in our case, in the Lithuanian language. So first of all, universal features of dysgraphia includes messy notes, poor handwriting, letters are inconsistent in size and space. Even when the child tries to write neatly, he or she faces challenges, and it is difficult to read what the child wrote. It is difficult to start writing tasks. There are a lot of crossing out of words and letters, and self-corrections are very frequent. And here are examples in our case, examples of grade 1. As you can see, child struggles in starting to write. First words, first syllables are just crossed out, and the writing itself is not neat. There are a lot of self-corrections, and also the child struggles to write letters, and they vary in shape, as you can see in this example. In grade 2 writings, we see the same pattern. Again, there are a lot of self-corrections, and almost every word, every sentence is crossed out. Universal features of dysgraphia also includes numerous mistakes. There are a lot of spelling and grammatical errors, and in this case, we also can speak about universal errors and language-specific errors. Here are examples of grade 1 words. You can see here teachers note that 23 mistakes had been made, 19 mistakes had been made. Actually, almost every word contains an spelling or grammatical error here. And the same pattern can be seen in grade 2 writings as well. Also, one of the common signs of dysgraphia, universal feature in all language, involves that similar looking letters are confused. For example, B and D, P and Q, and so on. These letter reverses are often linked to difficulties in visual motor integration and visual spatial processing. For example, in our case, we noticed that consonant B usually was substituted with consonant D because of visual resemblance. For example, instead of word brangi, the child wrote drangi. Instead of žvirblis, the child wrote žvirdlis, and so on. Among other universal features of dysgraphia, we can also mention word deformation, long words, more than 3 syllables, and longer ones, it is tendency to shorten them. Also, standard punctuation rules are neglected, and vowels in words are omitted. In our case study, these features we observed only in grade 1 writings. And here you can see examples of word deformation. Instead of word gitara, the child wrote gitar. Instead of gilė, gijel. Instead of gandras, gakatine, all the vowels are omitted here. And actually the words in these cases are so distorted that their meaning even cannot be understood. And also, as mentioned, there is a tendency to shorten long words, 3 syllable and longer ones. As it is provided in these examples, the word is bananas, but the child omits the first syllable and writes danas. In the example of word debesis, only the first syllable is written here, des, and bandelė, also the first syllable is omitted. And these examples illustrates that the child doesn't use full stops, so standard punctuation rules are neglected. One more feature, also to illustrate that, omission of vowels. And you can see provided examples as well. We suggest that these type of errors, vowel omission, word shortening, which were observed in our case only in the first grade, may be among the earliest signs of dysgraphia at school, and they appear then the child begins learning to write. And now let's move on to Lithuanian specific features of dysgraphia that are related with Lithuanian language system and grammar. Speaking specifically about Lithuanian, we can distinguish errors related with vowel clusters. Letters in vowel clusters can be substituted or omitted. Also, among common errors, we can distinguish long-short vowel substitution, also substitution of consonants based on phonetic similarity or visual resemblance, and incorrect use of the soft sign, errors containing consonant clusters, and of course errors related to Lithuanian specific grammar rules. Here are examples to illustrate vowel cluster substitution errors. So for example, if we have a vowel cluster ia, the child substitutes it with the cluster a. So instead of word piešia, we get peišia. Instead of word sienos, we see that the child writes seinos, and the cluster au is also, there is a tendency to change this vowel cluster to one. So instead of word plaukia, we see pluokia, not nuotrauka, which is correct, but nuotruoka, and so on. Omission, vowel omission errors. Here you also can see example. Instead of word vaisius, the child writes visus, and also so on. In Lithuanian language, we have specific rules, specific spelling rules, then which long or short vowel we need to write. And we can see that the child struggles to remember those rules, and the child where the long vowel is needed writes short one, and vice versa. In our data, we also noticed that consonants which are similar, which look similarly, are substituted. So, for example, if we have consonant g, it is substituted with consonant k. Instead of word daug, the child writes duok, not knygutė, but knygutė, and so on. We also can distinguish incorrect use of the soft sign. In Lithuanian language, letter E functions as a soft sign if it is used between a consonant and a vowel. So we can see that a child struggles to use it correctly because the soft sign is used where it's not needed. As an example, focuses, but child writes focuses, or child omits it where it is needed. For example, we have word kačiukas, but child writes kačiukas. Among common errors, Lithuanian-specific errors, we can see that a vowel is added to Lithuanian-specific consonant cluster. And of course, we can speak about errors that are related with grammar rules, including using of third-person singular ending of the verbs in the present tense, singular accusative case endings, plural genitive case endings, and singular locative case endings. And I'm running out of time, so just I will show all the examples. Here are examples that illustrates how the child, instead of correct present tense singular ending "ia," writes "a," which sounds similar as "ia." There are a lot of errors containing correct usage of accusative case, where the diacritic mark, which shows accusative case, is omitted. And we have the same with genitive case endings as well. So to sum up, we can see that early signs of dyslexia, of dysgraphia, can be seen already at the beginning of grade 1, and it includes messy handwriting, word deformation, because of the child not hear sounds clearly or not connects letters with sounds. Also, there is difficulty writing multisyllable words, problems with phonological analysis. Child struggles to hear and recognize individual sounds. And as we saw, child is unable to remember and apply grammar rules. So early identification of dysgraphia is crucial, and teachers and parents should be aware of these signs to help children as soon as these difficulties emerge. And as I mentioned, further analysis, of course, is required. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have time for a very brief question. Yeah, please.
Thank you. It's a very interesting topic, and I was wondering, was there any kind of pattern of frequent words being spelled correctly as the child got older, so basically kind of relying on memory alone?
As I mentioned, we haven't made yet quantitative analysis, but we will definitely look at it, what words and how often specific mistakes were made in specific words. But yes, thank you very much.
Anything else? If no, well, then thank you. And so, well, we have about 2 minutes. Well, if you want to change the section, or you can still ask something. So we'll start precisely at 1:15.
Mul on ikka kambi. Sina on õpetanud oma paruspakki tervist. Kuidas sealt mull on seda ikka? Kuhu ma vajutan? Siia edasi, siia pärast noole peale. Siis kraavi. See kõne 20.
Kas teil on mingid märkmed, tahate presenterview'd vaadata?
Ei, meil on paberpaber. Kas see läheb siit ära või?
Ta peaks minema mingi hetkel.
Vist üles poole liigutada ei saa. Paneme sealt kinni. Pole vaja teisel kuulata. Nii, nüüd me alustame.
We continue. So the next presentation is by Reeli Torn-Leesik and Liina Tammekänd. The use of modal verbs and adverbs by Estonian school leavers in their English state examination essays. Please.
Hello, my name is Reeli and this is my colleague Liina. So we are going to talk about modal verbs and adverbs in school leavers state examination essays. Or should I? Oh. So just to continue, the study is part of a bigger project that looks at, I can use this one as well. Project that looks at the criteria features in Estonian learning English. So actually we want to create or compile Estonian learning English examination corpus and look at the grammatical structures and then compare them to criteria features identified in the English profile project. And in this small study, we are looking at modal verbs and adverbs in Estonian learning English state examination essays and trying to see whether there are any correspondences to the progression of such verbs and adverbs that were identified in English profile projects. So I'm used to. Skipped too quickly. So our research questions are what, when studying these essays, we were trying to figure out which modal meanings and functions Estonian learners use in their English and how these modal verbs and adverbs such uses aligns with findings identified in English profile project representing different proficiency levels and whether we can see any progression across levels as well. So very briefly to remind, so when we talk about modals in English, how we can express modal meanings, so of course we have 9 core central modals that form a homogeneous group and that have similarities with primary auxiliaries. B do have. So the similarities are called nice properties, so they negate and form questions, so inversion structure, but they are invariant effective verbs. Then there are marginal modals that also have auxiliary negation and can be used the same way in forming questions, so involving inversion, but many of them are actually restricted to, in this modal sense, to British English. Then we have semi-modals and modal idioms, and of course verbs with modal meanings. Our focus here were mostly on the central core modals, so we didn't look at main verbs with modal meanings. So when we talk about modal meanings, then we can group them into 3. So when permission, possibility, ability, obligation, necessity, volition, and prediction. And of course, each modal can have 2 different types of meanings. So expressing intrinsic modality or extrinsic modality. Intrinsic modality refers to event states that are under human control. So we have permission, obligation, prediction, intention here, and extrinsic modality then refers to the logical status of events, states, and sort of expresses the likelihood of this event or event taking place. So we have possibility, necessity, and prediction. Our aim actually was to look at modal adverbs as well. So of course, modal adverbs are more numerous. So instead of using a modal, you can use a modal adverb to express modal meaning, but mostly these modal adverbs express epistemic modality, so extrinsic modality, and we could have sort of scalar strength of the modality expressed by modal adverbs.
Okay, so I'll continue with the background. There are several recurring themes in previous studies. Several authors have observed developmental trajectories, which means that learner output becomes more target-like with increasing proficiency. Surprise, surprise. So one issue is disproportionate use of certain modals, for example, like can, or general overuse by learners. Another concern is misuse at semantic or pragmatic level. For example, inappropriate hedging, overly strong assertions, difficult expressing epistemic stance. There have been discussions about the influence of the first language or cultural background on modal use. And then there's a shared recognition of the need for expanding instruction beyond core modals to include modal adverbials, adjectives, and lexical verbs. So, there. So, you probably know what it is, a common European framework. So the CFR, what it does, and it's necessary for us as foreign language educators. We know that it has this non-language specific descriptors, but this wonderful document has received also some criticism. For example, it is not based on empirical data. This is purely based on, as I've understood, gut feeling. And it does not account for language-specific aspects. And to address these limitations, reference level descriptions for many languages that use corpus data have been developed. So, and now we move on to English project profile. Here I have English grammar project. This is one of the kind of sub-projects of this profile project. Profile project consists of grammar project, probably it's profile, English grammar profile, it sounds more logical. And then English vocabulary profile and English functions profile. We are mostly interested in English grammar profile. So people came together, looked at the Cambridge examinations, analyzed that's interesting. So analyzed the learner data and came up with sorry, it's very distracting. Came up with language level descriptors for English. So here we have some examples, O-level descriptions for English. At A2 level, learners produce, for example, simple sentences without objects. At B1 level, they are able to form verb plus subject plus infinitive constructions, and at the B2 level, they already form more complex structures. These descriptions and others, there's a list of those, are then based on the Cambridge examination data. So, however, this data is sourced from the written exam only, so it may not reflect the actual language use. These are people talking, aren't they? Ma ei saa juba midagi.
Tahtsin, et sul tutvustaks.
Okay. So. Okay, here you can see a highly generalized and summarized overview how modal form develops according to English grammar profile. So at A1 level, students use basic affirmatives, questions, and negatives. At A2 level, conditional constructions are added in the repertoire. At B1 level, we can see this explosion of functions, and later on the development kind of calms down a bit. So here we can see how modal functions develop according to the English grammar profile. Basically, again, we can see the surge of development at B1 levels. So, and I've taken out lots and lots of functions. So there were so many, otherwise I would have 5 slides here. So just to demonstrate that at B levels, all kinds of interesting things are supposed to happen with the language. So.
Okay, coming to our data, so the material we used, we had 500 school leavers English state examination essays from different years. Years were determined because when we think about, when you look at the state examination, then 1 year you have a report in a written part, 1 year you have an essay. So we wanted essays. The language of the learners was, L1 was Estonian. And the total running words were 108,000 words. And these essays, according to the results, were divided into 3 proficiency levels. So the state examination in English is a bi-level exam. So you have B1, B2, and it is 100 points. So 70 and above receive B1 up to 75, and then above 75%, 75 point B2. So what we did with our data, so used to using computer, we digitalized the essays and keyboarded and checked whether we made any mistakes. And then when analyzing our data, we used word encrum and keyword in context tools, and we also normalized frequencies for 10,000 words to make the subcorpora comparable as well. And when looking for semantics, so modal meanings and functions, we had to do it manually. So each of us worked on their own, and then we compared the results. And here comes the results.
So somewhere, okay. We had 4,297 observations in general. So, and we left some out. So, for example, the very extremely erroneous forms where we couldn't understand what the student actually meant with the modal. So there weren't many of those. So, as you can see, the most popular modal verbs in Estonian learner the state examination English are can, would, will, and should. So B2 level students use a bit could and might, but other forms were not so frequent. So here we have the exact same slide, but with native speaker data. We got the native speaker data from the Loch Ness corpus versus subcorpus of A-level exam essays. So And this is not the focus of our study, but it is still noteworthy that this appears to be this overuse of can in Estonian learner English when compared to the native data. So natives, of course, like to use would a lot. So not here. Okay. I gave it a long thought how to visualize, how to compare what kind of forms we had in our data when compared to the English grammar profile. So everything that is yellow, what is was in our data. Everything that is crossed out was not in our data. So you can see the functions are quite limited when compared to the English grammar profile. So A1 level, A2 level, this coincide. B level is a very weird level. So one noteworthy thing is that according to the English grammar profile, we should have modal perfect forms emerging at this level. They didn't, they appeared in our data at B2 level, so. And we can't see any higher level functions, although this is quite understandable because we do not have C-level examiners. So now I'm going to show you 3 slides with the most frequent modals and functions. So can was the most frequent modal used in Estonian learner English in our examination data. It had the most functions. This is like general truth there. For example, like this, you can take the train at this train station. This is general truth. So you can see they express modality, so possibility and impossibility, a little bit of ability, inability, and everything else is not relevant for them. So should, another frequent modal in our data. Overwhelmingly, they use it to give advice and make suggestions. And they also describe desired situation, how something should be in their life. So they do not use it much for expressing obligation or expectations. So, and here we can see functions of would. So imagine situation, wishes and preferences, they kind of overlap. It's difficult to decide which is which. So this is used a lot for expressing imagined situations, usually in conditional constructions. So, and other modals. This little table that we have here, a graph, we just wanted to know which one they used more, must or have to, and here you can see the answer. So we didn't look much into it, but later on we probably will. So modals will, must, have to, may, might, could, these were used in expected functions. More advanced or complex modal phrases or words, verbs were used extremely rarely or not at all. Need, as you can see, it was used only lexically. And we have also task influence because the exam prompts or exam essay prompts, they deal with hypothetical future situations and students lift the formulations from prompts obviously. So, and here I'll show you this. Estonian students must study 15 subjects in Form 10 to 12. Some people think that students should be able to choose only 5 subjects to concentrate on. And should the present system be changed, we have 3 modal verbs. And then I got these concordances. So, why students use the exact wording. So, this is now the same thing for functions. In yellow are the functions that were in the English grammar profile and that were in our data in the places where they were supposed to be. Crossed out functions did not appear at all, and B1 level is kind of a very interesting level. Nothing that was supposed to be there according to the English grammar profile was not actually there. The functions either occurred at A2 level or later. So, and now, very final bit, a little bit about modal adverbs. So here you can see the modal adverbs and their emergence in English vocabulary profile. That is certainly at A2 level, move on to undeniable at C2 level. So, and this is then the frequency in our data. As you can see, the modal adverbs are used rarely. The most popular word is maybe. But at the same time, when we look at the nice colors, my phone tells me, stop now. I'm not going to stop now. So, A2 level words appear at A2 level, B level words appear at B level, and this, what it is, I don't know what it is. So, but basically we can see that everything is how it's supposed to be. There's just so few of them. So, your turn, Leila.
I conclude what you have said. So, as you can see from the graphs, and we can conclude, of course, Canwood will shoot out the most frequently used modals, and in the context where they express possibility or giving advice, suggestion, imagine situation. And there is, when we look at the formal variety, so there is no big difference when compared to English grammar profile. Modal perfect, when commenting on the form, appears on B level. So in these essays and functional variety, so on A2 level, there is a similarity, isn't the same functions that mentioned in English grammar profile emerged also, or we were able to identify on this level in our learners' essays as well. So B1 is a sort of fluid, weren't able to find a good term for that level, and on P2 level, just some functions added. As to adverbs, as the previous slide showed, that the emergence corresponds to, but at the same time, not so many adverbs were used. Of course, when we look at the data, we have a feeling that it is the task influence that also influences the choices, modals and modal adverbs that were used. And we have to look at that in greater detail. And that was all. These are the references, and we are. So, couple of short questions, yes, please.
Thank you. One short question about the modals that have been lifted from the prompts. Did you kind of disregard them or completely disregarded them?
Out.
They just copied and
the exact same formulations.
Yeah, often it was used.
Yes, please.
I wonder if there can text like rhetorical questions or use of shall, or because I think shall is often thought that is used for like first person questions. Then these text types just.
Exactly.
Anything else? If no, thank you very much. And so we conclude our